A little context behind what we do, which is migrant sheltering. Here's a timeline that traces the sheltering operation in southern New Mexico and West Texas for the 40 plus years. Border Servant Corps has been hosting families since April of 2018. We started hosting families at Peace Lutheran Church, where we received about 30 individuals, which is about 10 to 12 families a week. And in 2019, we ran a weekend shelter out of La Quinta Hotel. Unfortunately, we had to put all of this on pause during 2020 and the first half of 2021 because the border was essentially closed, in part because of the migrant protection protocol that was put in place by the Trump administration, and in part because of the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2020, BSC was asked to design, open, and operate a permanent sheltering operation here in New Mexico. In the summer of 2021, BSC was awarded a grant from the Federal Emergency Management Agency to provide shelter and travel assistance for asylum seekers. In the fall of 2021, BSC opened its first 24/7 hotel-based hospitality center here in Las Cruces. Since September, we've helped about 30,000 asylum seekers. In the summer of 2022, we moved to a new congregate campus. A couple of key terms that we want to keep in mind while going through this orientation. A migrant is anyone who leaves their country of origin and goes to reside for a period of time in another country. Refugee is a person who is forced to flee their country of origin out of a fear of persecution. That is a legal definition according to international law. Asylum is a protection that is granted to a migrant that arrives at a foreign border if that person meets the requirements for that protection. In order to be eligible for that protection, a person must be unwilling or unable to return to their country of origin due to a fear of persecution. An asylum seeker is a person who has requested asylum through the legal process. They haven't been recognized as refugees yet, and they're waiting to receive a decision on their asylum claim. This process includes a credible fear interview, where authorities determine whether the asylum claim will be considered or denied. It can be a very painful process for the asylum seekers because they're asked to relive the trauma that they've experienced throughout their journey. So this is an important thing to keep in mind. An asylee is a person who has received protective status. There are several processes through which refugees get to the U.S. The first one is called the refugee resettlement process. This is for people fleeing persecution who have already been granted that refugee status by the United Nations, either in their home country or in a refugee camp. By the time they get to the U.S., they've already been given a legal designation that makes them eligible to receive certain protections and services. And there is often an organization like the International Rescue Committee or Lutheran Family Services that have contracts with different states here in the U.S. to help the refugees with the resettlement. This is the smoothest process that occurs for refugees, but it can take decades. The second process is the affirmative asylum process, in which people are fleeing their country and have special visas to enter the U.S. Again, this is a smoother process because people have already been granted that legal authority to enter the U.S. before they actually arrive at the border. The families and individuals that we're working with are mostly undergoing Process C, which is for arriving asylum seekers. This is a process where people are fleeing without having been granted that refugee status by the United Nations, and they're arriving at the border of the country where they want to claim asylum. That is their first step in claiming asylum. As you can imagine, it can be a very harrowing process because the person doesn't actually know what status or what protection they could be granted until they present their case at the border. And the merit of their case is determined right there or over a series of days during which they may be detained at the border. The folks that we support have arrived at the border, have been granted probation to enter into the U.S., and enter the asylum seeking process due to their credible fear interviews. They're given a court date for the first asylum hearing that's 1 to 3 months after their release date, and then they are released to enter into the U.S. and travel to the homes of their sponsor families. And that's where we come in. Once they've been released by the border authorities, asylum seekers are brought to our hospitality center or hospitality centers around the border, where they provide them temporary shelter and help them arrange travels to the home of their sponsors so that they can get there in time to attend their first hearing and continue the asylum seeking process. They're not asylees when they come to us, we're just to stop in a much longer journey. And finally, the defensive asylum seeking process is for folks that are already here in the U.S. and are forcing deportation and are asked to justify their request for asylum in order to escape deportation. We're not involved with the process. If you have any more questions about any of these processes, we recommend looking at the materials prepared by Human Rights First for more information. A federal policy update. MPP, which is also known as Remain in Mexico, it states that the U.S. government will return certain asylum seekers to Mexico to wait throughout the duration of their cases pending in the U.S. immigration court system. It was initially introduced in December of 2018 and was wound down in 2021. In the summer of 2021, it was reinstated by court order and included everyone in the Western Hemisphere, except for people from Haiti, Venezuela, and Nicaragua. In the fall of 2021, it was expanded to include all asylum seekers from the Western Hemisphere. In practice, it gets a little complicated. The expansion hasn't been fully implemented in every sector of the border, and there's a lot of inconsistency from the people who determine whether an individual can be enrolled in MPP. The Supreme Court allowed the Biden administration to begin winding down MPP so that people are allowed into the U.S. for their court dates. Title 42 is a public health order in the U.S. which prohibits entry into the country when the Director of Disease Control believes that there is a serious danger of the introduction of a communicable disease into the United States. It allows the U.S. to prohibit entry to anyone except U.S. citizens, lawful permanent residents, and their spouses and children. Title 42 has been used to prohibit asylum seekers from entering the U.S. because of the concerns and the spread of COVID-19. Asylum seekers are expelled into Mexico if they are flown from a country that Mexico will accept, or they are flown directly to their country of origin if Mexico will not accept them. It was going to be lifted in late May, but it was blocked by a Louisiana judge and was being litigated in the courts. In October of 2022, Title 42 was still in place, and Venezuelans were being expelled into Mexico. In November of 2022, Federal Judge Sullivan blocked the federal government from continuing the use of the emergency health order that immediately expelled all immigrants from entering the U.S. Judge Sullivan granted a request letting immigration officials have 5 weeks to comply with the order, meaning that the government has until December 21st of 2022 to end Title 42. So then who are we serving? We're serving Central American families, and we expect to see more of these families once the border is reopened fully and there are changes to MPP. We are also serving South Americans and folks from other parts of the globe that have entered through Brazil and Chile and made an overland journey through South and Central America and Mexico.